Right, there are various things that can make this light flash. This temperature light here. When you turn the ignition on, it should flash momentarily. I'll show you. Turn the ignition off, turn the ignition on. There you go, it flashes 1, 2, 3, 4 times and then extinguishes. This is normal. I'll show you a few things to check for if it continues to flash. The first things to check for are the temperature sender units. This black one here is the temperature sender unit, and I'll show you what to do here. Take a piece of wire and bridge across the two contacts inside the switch cap. This shows the two wires here that lead from the sender unit bridged here, which will then, or should, when turning on the ignition, give a full scale deflection on your temperature gauge. You can do the same on the sender unit there on the header tank. This will eliminate the possibility that you have a faulty sender if you get full scale deflection on your temperature gauge. Right, with the contact bridge under the bonnet, in other words, we're shorting out where the temperature sender goes, I shall now switch on the ignition and show you what happens. This will prove that the wiring between the sender unit and the dashboard is okay. I'll turn on the ignition and you'll see the temperature gauge rising, giving a full scale deflection there, just proving that your wiring between the sender and the back of the instrument panel is okay. I'll turn the ignition off and that will now drop away. What this also proves is that your voltage stabiliser on the back of this unit, it's this little chappy under here, the voltage stabiliser is also okay. The other connections on the voltage stabiliser with the ignition switched on, the right hand side is showing battery voltage 11.49 volts, and again we'll go back to the left hand side showing 9.91 volts, which means your voltage stabiliser is working correctly. If this voltage stabiliser is faulty, there is a very cheap alternative to replace this with, and I'll show you what that is just now. Right, this is known as a Fairchild 7810 semiconductor. These can be obtained extremely cheaply online, and they tend to come with the prongs straight, so you have to bend them in this fashion to enable them to clip in where the original voltage regulator clips in at the back of the instrument panel. But a sure sign that you have a problem with this little semiconductor voltage regulator is that you have no deflection on either your temperature gauge or your fuel gauge, and that is a sure sign that this little baby has gone. So as I say, Fairchild 7810 semiconductor, outputting 10 volts from variable inputs of 12-13 volts according to what your alternator is putting out, but it will put out a steady 10 volts. Hope this is of interest and of use to people watching. I'm sure it's going to save some people a lot of heartache and a certain amount of cash. So just to sum up, this flashing coolant light here can be caused by various things. It can be caused by faulty senders. It can be caused mainly by no voltage being applied to the back of the temperature gauge, as it was the case in my particular case. No voltage was applied to the back because there was a dirty contact on the two screws, on the two nuts that hold the gauge to the printed circuit board, and that's all it was in my particular case. The fuel gauge, the temperature gauge was reading 0, and because there was no voltage on the back of the gauge, this temperature or overheat flashing light was permanently flashing, which is just another symptom. Obviously it's a symptom of the engine overheating, but that's another story. You can check the heat of the oil at least on the MFA here. But this flashing continually, no reading on the gauge, points either to an open circuit on the gauge itself, a faulty gauge, or as in my case, just a bad connection on the back, simply cured by undoing the two nuts, cleaning off the back of the printed circuit board and screwing the nuts back down again, and everything then was hunky-dory, working as it should do.